Welcome to the Home Builder Digital Marketing Podcast. Over 90% of today's home buyers start their buyer journey online. Here we talk with not only industry experts, but also your fellow home builder marketers to learn how you can succeed in our incredibly competitive digital world. And now, here are your hosts, Greg Bray and Kevin Weitzel.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Home Builder Digital Marketing Podcast. I'm Greg Bray with Blue Tangerine.
And I'm Kevin Weitzel with Outhouse.
And we are excited to have joining us today Carol Morgan. Carol is the president at Denim Marketing. Welcome, Carol. Thanks for being with us today.
It is great to be with you.
Well, Carol, I know we've had you on before, but it's been a little while, so we appreciate you joining us again. But give us that quick background and overview for those folks who haven't had a chance to meet you before.
All right. Well, Carol Morgan, president and founder of Denim Marketing. We are a 26-year-old company this year, which is kind of exciting in itself, builder focused, and we produce quality content for email marketing, blogging, social media, public relations, and overall strategy. So that's kind of what we focus on.
All right, before we jump into that, though, we need to hear an interesting factoid that our listeners will learn about you that has nothing to do with work, the home building industry, or family, or in your case, horses.
Good.
I took
I've got one.
plate.
You took the horses off the plate. Well, I have one for you, Kevin. So I think a lot of people don't know that I volunteer for a German Shepherd dog rescue here in Atlanta called Canine Pet Rescue. I've probably volunteered for them, golly, for a decade-ish, maybe more. But I run all their social sites. So if you go to Facebook or Insta, or every now and then we put something on LinkedIn and go to Canine Pet Rescue, you'll see some of our work there. It's all pro bono. In fact, it's a really cool organization in that everyone who is involved in Canine Pet Rescue is a volunteer. There's no one paid position at all. And we adopt out on average somewhere between 75 and 100 German Shepherds a year. People think that just because they're pedigreed dogs that they don't end up in shelters and they don't end up in rescues, but they do. Anyone who follows rescue knows that a few years ago, it was like it was raining pit bulls. Well, now it's raining German Shepherds from the sky. They are everywhere. So if you've ever thought you might want to rescue a German Shepherd, then do your research. There's some fantastic dogs out there of all ages, all levels of training, great dogs. So Canine Pet Rescue.
I didn't think it was possible to admire you anymore, but you just elevated yourself yet again.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a labor of love. I've had Shepherds pretty much my whole life. As an adult, I'm on Shepherd number 4. For those of you all who know Champ, he likes to bark every now and then in the background. It could be a little annoying, and he's, a little anxious every now and then, like a typical Shepherd, but he's behaving right now, so we'll give him thumbs up.
Kevin, when you took away the horses, I thought she was going to try and flip donkeys in there just because they're not horses, just to show you up.
I honestly was trying to stump her because I thought it would be fun just to stump her, and we could always edit out if we stumped her anyway. But I'm not kidding you. I use, and I have on my desk, the donkey coaster so I could put my drink on her ASF.
It rhymes better if you say put your glass on her.
It does.
Yeah.
All right. Well, back to our family show. Well, Carol, one of the reasons that we wanted to have you back, not just because you have a lot to share in general, but we know that you just released not too long ago a brand new book on social media marketing. And so we wanted to dive in a little bit into that today. What is it, though, about writing the book that made you even want to take on a project like that?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think most people listening probably know I've written a few books on social media, and my last book was published, I want to say in 2018. So everything about it was obsolete, right? So it was just time for a new one. And because of social media and how it moves at such a fast-paced speed, it's really hard to write a book that stays current. So I really focused in this book on themes and strategies and kind of overarching ideas behind social media and the why, not so much on the how. There is some how in there, but not nearly as much as my very first book way back in the day, or even the last couple. So this one really dives into, moving beyond what I call feeding the machine into building a cohesive social media strategy that ties in with the rest of your marketing efforts.
Now, is this specific to home builders, or is this for more general any companies?
So the answer to that's kind of yes. I will tell you the title's more generic. It's social media marketing for your business. Anyone in business can pick it up and learn something from it. I will say I do have quite a few home builder examples in there because that's most of who we work for. So that's most of my experience. So yes, it's more specific to home builders than anyone else, but any small business can learn from it.
So your book from a few years ago is completely obsolete because social media changes so much. What is it about social media that has been changing so much between these two efforts of yours?
That is a great question. So when I went back, because this is a second edition, which is kind of funny, because when I went back and looked at the first edition of this book, I just kind of giggled because there were things in it like it referred to Google My Business, which is now not called that anymore. And it had Twitter in it, which is now X. And it had a couple of social sites that, we all thought that were going to take off, which didn't, which I pulled out of there. Like, it had a whole chapter on Snapchat, I think. But there was a lot of stuff in there that just really hadn't panned out to be the next it. So I pulled a lot of that out. And what the old book really didn't focus on so much, the new one talks a lot about is the impact of visuals. Because the biggest thing that happened between the first book and the second book was COVID, which really changed everything so much, right? People are so much more comfortable online in settings like where we are right now on Zoom and in conferences that are online, and they're much more likely to shop online and expect to see everything there. And seeing everything on social media means it's much more video heavy, 3D interactive, more photos, just much more visual than it was in 2018, 2017.
So I have a question for you because Greg brought up something that I want to dive deeper into, and that is the constant moving in the goalposts. Because yes, social media has shifted, but it used to be where if you just placed a column post, not a paid post, just a regular post, and you did that on a regular basis, you would grow your, I guess it would be just a kind of generically termed a rating. And your rating would determine how many times people get to open up and see. And then basically, once you hit that cap, it shuts off. But even that's changed. Then it was where if you place a video in it, you'd get more likes and more outreach and more commentary, etc. But those rules are constantly changing. How does a builder keep up with those constantly moving goalposts?
That's the million-dollar question, Kevin. I think if you're doing social media for one entity, it might be a little harder to keep up with that than if you touch many, many entities on a daily basis, because the more you touch it, the more you see, and the more you can see the changes in the goalpost, as you put it. Today, there are more sizes, more configurations. Each site has its own specifics. Putting a regular post up with just an image isn't enough anymore. What are you putting in Reels? What are you putting in stories? Are you resizing things for Instagram? Do your Instagram posts have graphics and text all over them, which is not something people on Instagram really want to see? Are you using filters? Are you creating that continuity across all of your social media so that it really matches your brand and people know, hey, that's XYZ Home Builder by just seeing the image before they even notice your icon or your logo? It's just become a lot more work and a lot more time consuming to do it well and do it right with all the nuances of the different sites. So that's the hardest thing, I think, for people to keep up with, is the constant change and the fact that whatever was on Facebook that worked yesterday is probably not the same today because they changed something and they didn't tell any of us.
So because of that, there's this potential, and I know because I've felt it just in my own marketing. It's too much. It's overwhelming. I don't know what to do. I can't keep up, so I do nothing. What do you say to folks that kind of have that, I just don't even know what to do, so I'm going to just go do something else completely?
Yeah, the hard part is if you look at the way people are shopping now and you look at the customer journey, it's less linear than ever. There's actually been some really good research by Google and others that shows, I define it kind of more as a honeycomb. People may touch your website, then kind of touch your social, and then go look at something else. And a few months later, they look at your social again, and it's kind of all over the place. So you're really missing out on that opportunity to help confirm a home shopper's choice if you're not on social. So I guess my advice is if it's too overwhelming, pick one site and do it well. Don't worry about doing all of it. Maybe it's 2 sites if you count your blog, which is kind of social and kind of not, but blog and then at least reshare those blog posts to Facebook. Facebook is still the million-pound gorilla. Like it or hate it, that's where the bulk of the consumers are. Most people have an account there and use it in some shape, form, or fashion. So if you're going to pick one site, that's where to start. I guess there's also an argument for only being on YouTube because a lot of search is on YouTube. So if you're trying to attract that younger demographic, then having a really strong YouTube presence that's very, very well built out might be a good place to be instead of Facebook if you really just don't want to do Facebook and Insta. But it's a lot of work and it's time consuming. And I think it is scary for people, especially people who aren't marketers.
I kind of lump builders into different categories based on what their digital prowess is. What do they have on their website? But you can even do the same thing for social. I mean, because you have in one bucket, you've got builders that don't do anything at all, don't even have a presence on LinkedIn or Facebook or anything else. Then you have the ones that do a post that was way back in 2017, and that's all that's live on their profile anymore. Then you get the ones that they have their niece or nephew or son or daughter that just goes on and puts these random posts up that have no strategy, no rhyme or reason behind them other than just frequency. Then you have people that actually hire in somebody specific on staff to do it. And then there's people that actually like to dump gasoline on the fire by hiring in a professional agency that comes in and actually does it right. You can actually see ROI on that expenditure. So what is the bucket that you like to go after the most as an agency? Do you like that one that has nothing, like blank slate? Or do you want somebody that's tried and failed and you can absolutely right their boat, if you will?
I would say yes to both of those because there's benefits to both. So the company that's never done social media, the builder who's never done it, is a really easy transition because we're not figuring out how to get into all their accounts that they have no idea how to log into, which can take forever and is not easy, especially if some agency still owns them and the people have left that agency. It can be a complete nightmare. It can take us sometimes 2 or 3 weeks or even a month to get into all of their social media profiles if they've been built by third parties or employees who aren't there anymore, all of that. So that is one thing I would really stress to builders is build something that the owner of the company has access to all of, whether they know how to use it or not. If they can get into it or somebody can get into it on their behalf, then they can give the right people the keys to the kingdom. Because I cannot tell you how many times we simply cannot get into social media accounts. So there is some beauty to building it from scratch because you can do it right from the beginning and you can set it up so that the builder has complete control of it, has access to their analytics and access to their ad accounts and all the things that we wish we had when we were taking over a different account. And you can show going from zero to whatever, right? We have case studies, especially on the B2B land developer and build to rent side, where we've taken, general contractors from zero following on LinkedIn to, 3,000, 4,000 in, 18 months. So there's that. And then the other side of it is taking over an account, if they've had a bad experience or if they haven't had the right ROI or, whatever reason it is. It's always nice to come in and again, be able to see that incremental spike in traffic when you revamp a system and get it working correctly and show them the ROI behind a really sound strategy. So we like both of those. Both of those work well, especially if you've got a strong internal contact that can help you with all the information you need. Because that is the one thing I would say that a lot of times builders maybe don't understand is, when you hire a marketing agency, you still need somebody inside to feed information to them, no matter what they're doing, whether they're a web dev company or whether they're doing your advertising or whether they're doing your social media. Somebody's got to help with, photos and answers to questions and positioning and target audience and all the things that it's going to take you a while to learn as a third party agency.
Carol, a minute ago, you mentioned YouTube. Sometimes in conversations, I don't know that YouTube necessarily pops on people's radar when we say social media, when we talk about a program with social media. I'm not quite sure why. And maybe it's just because it's a little bit different the way it works from some of the others. But YouTube is a huge opportunity that we don't see a lot of builders tapping into. Do you have a lot of folks that you see working YouTube, or is it really a missed opportunity for a lot of folks?
I think it's a missed opportunity, and I think it's a missed opportunity because it requires video. Somebody's got to produce that video. Somebody's got to think through that video. Are you recording it on your iPhone for YouTube? I don't know, probably not. But, coming up with 2 or 3 different series of 90-second to, 2-minute videos on different topics and then promoting them correctly on YouTube and then promoting them through your social and maybe tying them back through to your website and all of that. I mean, again, it's just a whole different strategy. And I still don't see people spending the time on video in our industry that they should be.
I would agree with that. I mean, they have videos, but then they just shoot a video and they just throw it on there. And I'm not sure
Right.
that quite counts as a social media strategy either.
No, it doesn't. No. Part of the strategy behind YouTube is that when somebody finishes a video that's similar to the ones you've put up, you want to be the one that's suggested as the next video. And a lot of that requires, an SEO strategy as well on YouTube. You can't just throw the video up with one sentence. You need to throw the video up with, 250 or 400 of the right words that describe that video so that when people are searching for things on YouTube, that your video comes up. So again, it gets back to that content and content marketing and the fact that people don't like to write. And that becomes a challenge for a lot of people as it relates to social media content, on Facebook and Instagram, as well as, content for YouTube and other places. It all boils down to having that strategy and coming up with a creative plan and then putting it all on paper and working it.
While we're talking about platforms, we've talked about Facebook, talked about Instagram, YouTube. What are the other ones that are like must-dos, and which ones are like places to play and experiment and just kind of keep an eye on right now?
That's a great question. So I think Blue Sky is a great place to play on right now. I think depending on your demographic, TikTok's a great place to play. The must-haves are still going to be Facebook and Instagram. Maybe Pinterest, maybe not. I don't know that anyone's really going to Pinterest to buy a house, but it is a good place to build awareness and build some brand. One that I think is a must-have that I'm still amazed how many builders don't use is LinkedIn. So to me, LinkedIn is one of the biggest untapped secrets in the home builder world because it's a pre-qualified, high net worth income individual that is out there. The average income of people on LinkedIn, I think, is $100,000, and they have a 4-year college degree. Think about how hard it is for us to target because we can't target demographically anymore, right? They're already targeted. They're on LinkedIn. Why aren't we using that to promote our homes more? And I'm not saying to post on it 5 times a week like you do Facebook. Don't. But one well thought post, either directed to realtors or directed to vendors, or if you've got a community opening, putting that out there. I mean, everybody out there is a consumer as well. Just because that's more of a B2B platform doesn't mean you can't flip it and turn it into B2C.
So 2 points on the LinkedIn thing is one point of clarity. That the 100K average income, there are people such as myself that radically skew that downward because I am practically a cave dweller.
All right, cave dweller, Kevin.
But I did learn something because I was at a conference and I met somebody that actually worked on the internal at LinkedIn. I used to go on and do our internal, like on our teams, and I'd say, I just did a post, get on there and like it and do whatever you want to do with it. And they said that's actually detrimental to your spread or to your reach because your throttle gets turned off or down when employees that are attached to a company are liking the post or commenting the post. Telling all your employees to get on there and like all your posts to get the spread, you're actually hurting yourself on the LinkedIn platform. I can't speak for anything else, but I know on LinkedIn it does hurt your reach.
There's lots of little strategies out there, right, of how to juice the algorithm and kind of play the game and stuff. And at the end of the day, I think, Carol, you'll agree with me, it's really about quality content that people actually want to like and share.
Right. Absolutely. Quality content that entices them to click on it. To some extent, we as marketers have to create the clickbait that we hate that the newspapers and journalists create, but we can create it in a thoughtful way. You can have a creative headline that isn't negative, right? Because so much of the press is negative, and that's what they use to get us to click. So, being creative and finding ways to pull people in so that they want to read your content and they know that your content's going to be spot on and what they're looking for is so important.
So taking that to the next level, then where does this content come from? How do we come up with more than 2 ideas? And then like a month from now, we're like, oh, well, never mind. We can't think of anything else, to do. Like Kevin said, they put 1 or 2 posts out a few years ago and they've never come back to it, partly because they didn't create a process, partly because they might not have known what else to do. So How do we create that?
I think that's a great question, Greg. Your marketing team, your owners, whoever's involved in marketing decisions, sit down and start a list. What's going on in the company? When are your next openings? When are you starting that next custom home? Make a list of all of those different things because people like to see groundbreakings. They like to see concrete poured. They like to see sticks in the air. You can have them go through a walkthrough when you're in frame, show them the HVAC and the plumbing and all those things. All of those make good social media stories. I know a lot of times we think about it and don't want to show the unfinished project, but people like that. They like seeing progress. So don't discount that. And then, any promotions or incentives, are you running something for the fall? Are you going to do some sort of fall leaves promotion? Do you have inventory homes? Do you have agents or realtors that have gotten credentials or promotions or CE classes? There's just a million different topics. So sit down and get different people from different avenues of the company to chime in on what they think would make good posts. And then, come up with some series of posts, whether it's different stages of the home build, or maybe it's a series of videos that a superintendent does versus a series of videos that a realtor does. There's so many different things you can do. You just got to sit down and brainstorm. And once you have that giant list, start putting it in buckets by quarter and then keep breaking it down by month and then by week until you have your content plan and know what you're going to say and do. It makes it so much easier if you know where you're going versus sitting down and going, oh no, I have to write a blog today. And you've got no ideas. I mean, worst case scenario, pull up ChatGPT and give them your website URL and say, give me 10 ideas for a blog post and social media post. And it'll give you some ideas that you can then, hash and rehash and put back into your own words and fix your branding and take out the words thrilled and spectacular. And it will be a great post.
So let's go to this whole AI thing. What about builders that are trying to lean too heavily on AI, where it's just literally putting out the same content for builder after builder after builder?
The challenge with AI and what I call generic content, or a lot of times I call it home and garden content, it's the same challenge for AI as it is for, Google search. If you're cranking out content that could be on ABC Builder's website or XYZ Builder's website, you're not doing anyone a favor. It's not quality, it's not original, and it's certainly not unique to your company and what you build. So I would dissuade people from doing that. If you want to write, again, what I call home and garden features fluff content and tie it back to your homes, your communities, your floor plans, that's great. Talk about why the color of the year is perfect to paint the living room wall, in your home and how to decorate it. There's a million ways to use that and use it right. But the generic content's got to go because it's not going to get indexed by Google and it's surely not going to get indexed by AI. What we as marketers and builders have to start thinking about is, what are people going to be searching next quarter online on AI or Google that I want to get indexed for? And how do I write that copy so that it's quality and original and ties back to my company and makes sense and sets us up as an expert? If you like to write, you're in really good shape. If you don't like to write, then you're going to have to hire somebody who does, because the game is going to get harder to play online as more and more content is going to be required to show up in those search results. Greg, you might have a different opinion on that from an SEO perspective.
You're spot on when you talk about unique content, useful content, things that are not generic enough that anybody could just take it and post it. Where some folks, I think, in the past got in trouble is they went to an agency and the agency was creating generic content and kind of feeding it, like changing logos and names and feeding it out to multiple clients, because it was, oh, how to winterize your home. And they would put it out
Right.
across, multiple places. And that kind of soured folks a little bit on what it is that an agency can do. And of course, there's a different price point for unique content than there is for generic content as far as effort goes and time and everything else too. And so that has to be recognized as well. So at the end of the day, it's all about what is useful for the audience, what
Right.
actually provides value. If you're providing no value, if you're just trying to capture an algorithm, it might work short term, but it's never going to work long term.
Yeah, that goes back to the Google Helpful Content Update, which I think was one of the last algorithms they rolled out, which basically said if your content's not helpful, if we can find it everywhere, if it's on multiple sites, then we're just not going to index it. It's not helpful if it's everywhere. Be, unique and different. So, yeah, good point.
To that point, Carol, where's the balance in content that is time sensitive versus timeless or evergreen. There's some things we want to get out there that's like, hey, we're doing this grand opening this weekend coming up in just a few days. But somebody sees that post after the fact, it's too late. Now there's a little bit of, oh, I missed out, maybe that has some
Right.
value, but a year from now, it's not going to have any value, or things. So how do we kind of
Ye-
balance that?
It's a good question. I think different builders balance that different ways. A lot of times, if it's something like, a happy holiday post, perfect place for that is in a story because it's going to time out, right? Your story's only going to run for so long. So you can run a lot of things that are more in the now, it's coming up, but it's not going to last forever as a story. To me, social media is the perfect place for all those things that are happening now that aren't evergreen because nobody's going to scroll back 6 months in your post to find out what you did 6 months ago, what you posted on Facebook. So that's a great place to put those types of things as opposed to, maybe on your blog. Maybe you want to blog about your upcoming grand opening, but after the grand opening's over, then you switch that to being more of a post on your model home or more generic on your community so that you're still getting that use out of that URL and getting that juice, but you've got something that's more timeless and evergreen. So I think there's a way to make it work hand in hand. But again, it takes a little bit of strategy and thinking through, how do we want to do this and why do we want to do it and where do we want to do it? Because there's so many different places to post content now.
So we do all this work, we're spending all this time and effort, we've got all these ideas, and we're putting it out there for 3, 4, 5 months. What are we going to get for our work? Are sales going to double? What's going to happen? How do we measure or have realistic expectations of what social media does for us?
Well, I think it's going to be different for every builder depending on what their goals are. So there are builders who put social media out there just to build awareness. You'll look at their pages and nothing's really clicking back to anywhere on the website. Then there's other builders who really want to use it to drive traffic. So every single post has a link that's clickable back to the website. So I really think where the rubber meets the road in terms of the return on investment and proving how social works is making sure that you have your Google Analytics 4 set up correctly with events. So you're tracking anyone who comes from social and completes one of those events on your website, whether that event is click to call, click for directions, completing a contact form. Once they've completed that contact form, if you've got the right software set up in your CRM system, then you know at what point that they've made it on site and had a meeting and toured your models and all of that. So it's really going to come down to setting up your Google Analytics and your other tracking software so that you can track those leads all the way through and see what they're doing. But we track through from Google as well as what's happening on individual sites. So, if one of your goals is to increase your engagement on Facebook, then track your engagement, track it month over month and year over year, and make sure that you are implementing a change. Because if it's going in the wrong direction, you need to do something different with your strategy if that's one of your goals.
So in other industries, you have key phrases that allow you to identify a company with just a phrase, like "Where's the beef?" What's the Taco Bell one? "Head for the border" or something along those lines.
Head for the border.
We have those kind of things here in Arizona. We had a builder. It was called Hancock Homes. They're not around anymore. They didn't survive the crash, but they were known as the 2x6 builder because all their walls were 2x6, which is freakishly fantastic when you're looking at
Right.
insulation qualities, sound quality, etc. There's a builder now, and I'm drawing a blank on who it is, but it's a builder that says that they're the most trusted builder.
Mm-hmm.
Where they get this silly rating from, I don't know, but somehow they're claiming they're the most trusted. What are your thoughts on a builder trying to get known for some sort of shtick or some sort of moniker that allows people to put that to them?
I mean, it's a great idea, but it's going to cost a lot because marketing dollars, are expensive. And to really get something out there, not just your brand, but your tagline, it's a great idea. But, part of the challenge is people don't buy a new home that often. I'm sorry, but everybody close your ears. I'm going to say it anyway. They're not necessarily shopping by builder. They're shopping by location. You do end up with builders whose brands are so strong that you have people buying second, third, fourth homes from them. But that's not as prevalent as the person who's moving and wants a specific school system. And maybe there's only 2 builders that have new home communities in those school systems. So that's who they're going to look at. And they may not have ever heard of either one of them. So it's a little harder. It's not like you're branding Starbucks or Target or something that's everywhere. We're branding the largest purchase of their life that they may only make 2 or 3 times, depending on how often they move or how many kids they have or all those different life events.
It's an interesting debate about the power of brand for a builder with the long gap between repeat opportunities. I was at a conference not too long ago where there was some back and forth on that, and some very strong opinions on both sides of whether builders should be trying to brand or not. But that's beyond the scope of what we have time to get into today. But Carol, we appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for sharing. Any last thoughts or pieces of marketing advice you wanted to leave before we kind of wrap up?
Golly, I will go with engagement over broadcast. Again, remember that social media is supposed to be a two-way conversation. And a lot of times we see builders that are really prioritizing that one-way promotion over the conversation. So building those stronger relationships are going to get better results. So taking the time to go into your social media pages, and if somebody's commented, thank them, or at least like the fact that they've commented, responding to questions. Otherwise, it's kind of like you're at a cocktail party and somebody's talking to you, but you're ignoring them. And it doesn't give them a warm fuzzy. We want our buyers to have a warm fuzzy, and social media is part of that equation. So I guess that's my parting shot across the bow. And, we all can do better, all of us. So I'm not saying that, we at Denim are perfect, but we do try. So please just try.
Two-part question. Where can our listeners find the second edition of Social Media Marketing for Your Business? And number two, second part of that question, is there a way to get an autographed copy? Or a photo with you and a horse or something? I don't know.
Goodness. Okay. Wow. So the first part of that question is easy. You can go to builderbooks.com. You can also go to amazon.com. I haven't checked, but I guess it's probably also at Barnes & Noble. So easy to find. As far as an autographed copy, they can bring their copy with them to the Home Builder Digital Marketing Summit here in Atlanta in September, and I'll be happy to sign it.
Well slipped in there. Well done. Well done.
Right. He's got a plug for the summit. What is that? Unsolicited.
I won't charge you off for that.
Carol, how can you elevate yourself even yet again? Canine Pet Rescue, plug in our summit. You're amazing.
You guys
Carol,
are amazing.
Thanks again for being with us. If somebody wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out and get in touch?
Pretty easy to find. Just go to denimmarketing.com. If you want to email me, it's carol@denimmarketing.com. Easy to find.
Well, thank you everybody for listening today to the Home Builder Digital Marketing Podcast. I'm Greg Bray with Blue Tangerine.
And I'm Kevin Weitzel with Outhouse. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about how Blue Tangerine and Outhouse can help you generate more qualified home buyer leads, visit bluetangerine.com and outhouse.net. If you've enjoyed our show today, please tell a friend, leave us a review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to join us again on the Home Builder Digital Marketing Podcast.